I am so pleased to welcome Fredrick Pumroy to this show. He's written a book called Born to Live on the Edge. Check this out: experiences from living on a farm to flying combat stories in Vietnam to retirement. And his retirement is a busy retirement, by the way. It's such a fascinating book about all these missions, things that he did leading up to actually doing those missions, what he did afterwards. In fact, I was looking at something from his book, and we're going to go to him in a second as you see, like he's sitting there. Can you imagine this? I've been to every state in the United States. He writes about this in his book. Been to every state in the United States and every major country in the Pacific. So think Guam, Philippines, Korea, Japan, etc. All of them. And after he retired, he talked about, I still have some other places I want to go. It's just a question of where his wife would want to go too. But wow, just fascinating tales. Thanks so much for having this conversation with us.
I'm enjoying to be here and sharing
What,
some of my experience.
yeah, what started your interest because you grew up on a farm? What started your interest in aviation?
Well, when I was about 8 years old, my dad and another farmer bought a L4 Army trainer. It was like a Super Cub, and we flew it out of the pasture, and he got his license, and I think they only paid $200 for it because they didn't have much money. But they were another farmer that owned his farm had an airplane and was in the flying farmer, so they got interested in it, and so we kept it in our farm, and so I got to fly in the air and all the acrobatics, and he wouldn't let me land and take off, but I did get to experience that. That really got me interested in flying to start with.
Right, so that interest starts as a young boy. What led you into the seat? Were you actually were flying? Were you actually eventually ended up in combat missions? Take us through that.
Well, initially, went to Ball State University and joined Air Force ROTC, and that got me started as we ended up getting a private pilot's license. And then I ended up qualifying for pilot training out of there, and then got commissioned, and then went through pilot training, and that's the beginning of the story, and then it grew from there.
So you're doing the ROC, you're doing all that, right? And when that happens, how did that lead those steps to the military?
Well, then, of course, out of ROTC, you get an assignment to the Air Force, and so I got in the first uh, class of 66A, which unfortunately had all the um, Air Force Academy, half Air Force Academy, and half distinguished graduates, and me, and which was a C student. So I had my work cut out for me, and and so and that's where we ended up, getting going into the Air Force, and then I don't know how far you want me to go into the experiences there, but
Well, it's interesting you say in the book, too, and this book is so good. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You talk about one of your chapters, of course, pilot training. You say, Mary and I arrived in Del Rio on July 9th, and we passed Laughlin Air Force Base. We saw smoke coming from an airplane that looked like it had crashed at the end of the runway. The local news that night reported that a student had crashed turning and had been killed. This was not the best news for your new bride to hear, just as her husband was to begin pilot training. Wow. You nailed it. I mean, there is danger to this, right? And you have to go through the paces of learning these machines.
yeah, that ended up with not just in our class, but in our all the classes at Del Rio that year, or Laughlin Air Force Base. We had eight students got killed that year. So, and about four of them were just a head-on collision when they were flying formation, and so actually there were six in that one.
Wow.
And
Um,
I came close. We had one incident where I had in the last one of my last flights in the T-37, which was the first airplane we flew at pilot training. Two engine, we call it the Tweety Bird. Anyway, I had a brand new first lieutenant trainer, instructor, and I was under the hood flying an instrument mission. Well, we get to this VOR instrument approach, and about 2,500 feet, just ready to put the gear down, and both engines flamed out. And so I'm under the hood trying to get them started, and we get down to about 1,500 feet, and he said, we need to eject, and I had tried 2 times to get them started, and so I think I can get them the third time. So we finally did, but it didn't scare me because I wasn't looking out, but we figured out we were probably close to 100 feet when we finally got leveled off and flying again. So that was fortunate we got out of that, but one of those flying on the edges.
Right, exactly. And that's, Born to Live on the Edge. That's the name of the book. So, what's the difference between the T-37 and then getting into the T-38 supersonic Talon aircraft? What's the big difference?
In fact, we were the first class in the T-38s, and
Wow.
it was a supersonic trainer. The other trainers were all subsonic, but so supersonic, and so you could go faster than the speed of sound if you wanted to.
And how fast were you flying them?
Well, only a couple of times I went speed of sound when I was solo because you really weren't supposed to because of the breaking windows and those kind of things, local residents. So I only did it once or twice.
Another thing that you talk about is you talk about your first assignment to Strategic Air Command, SAC, if I want to say it for short. And you talk about the fact that there's this other side to you. You tried out for the base basketball team, and I love what you say. We had a winning season, but we didn't perform too well in the Strategic Air Command tournament. I enjoyed it though, and it gave me some success while waiting for my reassignment to Castle. So you try to live a normal life when you're in the middle of doing all of this.
And in that case, I had change in assignment, so I didn't go through a recall school or when I was supposed to in July, and so that was actually October, and so I was able to play basketball and was involved with some other organizations like scheduling, maintenance, training, which I found interesting, and I was also able to join up, fly with the instructors. So when I finally got to Castle, which was the upgrade school, I already had a couple of 100 hours of flying time, and so I was pretty much checked out before I even got to the school to check me out, which was in July the next year. So I was there about 9 months before I was able to fly, and the the blessing of that was I ended up being the youngest aircraft commander in Strategic Air Command 2 years later. And one of the reasons for that was 6 of the older captains who had been co-pilots for about 6 years got frustrated. They went to the airlines, which left me next in line. And so I got a crew when I was a first lieutenant, just made captain, but hadn't pinned them on yet. So, and that led to me being the the officer of the year for Strategic Air Command, which gave me the opportunity of attending the Air Force Association convention in '68, and that led me to run into a colonel there who helped me get assignment to Vietnam in the OV-10.
Wow, and getting that assignment to Vietnam, you were in the thick of it. Take us through that and what some of those missions were like.
But I already have some experience in. We were in Young Tiger. There were 2 month tours, flying 135s, refueling the fighters, and so I already had experience with that. And then getting there's a whole other story getting to Vietnam, but when we arrived in country, we got welcomed with the first night. We got mortared, and one of the mortars landed right outside of my dorm door, and so I stayed undernight under my bed with my helmet and M16,
Wow.
but we didn't hurt anything. But so that led to we had an option of uh, being assigned in country where the you you got mortared every night or every other night, but you didn't get shot at with the big guns, just the small arms flying in country. The other option was to live in Thailand and flying over Laos and Cambodia, where especially Laos, where they had the big guns, 23 millimeter, 37 millimeter, 57 millimeter guns. So since I'd rather sleep at night, I decided to go volunteer for that, and I got that assignment to fly out of Thailand over the Ho Chi Minh Trail mainly.
Wow. And we, for many of us in our classes learning about the Ho Chi Minh Trail and what that was like. I mean, you really were in the thick of it when you went out. You didn't know what you were going to encounter, right, from day to day, other than obviously the intelligence and all of you working together. But every day was kind of a crapshoot.
Oh yeah. Well, we got shot at about every day by one of the types of guns. I only had one close call. Was the first 2 months I was there. Um, I was putting in a sortie right at the border of North Vietnam, South Vietnam, and Laos. It is the most heavily armed spot in the country. Anyway, I went in and had a F4 flight of F4s come in, and so my first pass to shoot my white phosphorus rocket and let them know where the target was. I would go down and then uh, pull up, and then we'd go upside down to see where the smoke hit the target, next to the target, and then we'd guide the fighters in. From there, well, when I just turned upside down, I got hit by a 37 millimeter shell, and it blew up my engine, and so I had a frozen propellers, and so it was like a speed brake, and center wing tank was full of fuel, and so I headed back, told the fighters where to hit from my smoke, and then the lead came over to see what was the damage was, and said, "Well, you still have your center wing tank on." Well, I had ejected my rockets, and so and should have ejected the center wing tank. What I didn't know was the crew chiefs, since we'd lost so many in the war, they'd safety wired the center wing tanks, and so they didn't eject. Well, luckily I'd left my pump on, was ejecting fuel when I filled my wing tanks up. So I was losing about 200 feet a minute. So I ended up, I get down just so I could actually level off and fly without losing altitude, about a little less than 1,000 feet over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which wasn't real comfortable. I was but prayed and didn't even look out because I was afraid to see what was shooting at me. But it was
Wow.
probably below the tree level, so they didn't see me anyway.
Wow. As you said, you got shot at, that was typical. So your planes would have bullet holes. You'd get out of the plane and you'd see, oh, there we go. That's what we got.
But the big ones we didn't hit us much because we could tell with the tracers whether they're going to hit us or not. So if they moved in your windshield, you just disregard them. If they didn't move, then you better move quickly. So they normally didn't get. We lost I think 12 airplanes during the year in our squadron, and
Wow.
we got everybody but 8 of them out. But then I had the next the next 2 months ended up there was 5 Raven facts. They worked for the CIA and lived in Laos, and they were mostly of our squadron. After a year, the young guys that weren't married would usually volunteer to go back over there, stay, and so 5 of them got killed in 1 week. So I ended up flying their mission for them until they retrained another 5 pilots. And so I ended up moving to Udorn Air Base in Thailand, which is where Air America flew out of. And so I lived with Air America, and then I flew the mission for General Van Powell, who was a Laotian general, and they were basically flowing close air support. And so there I had ended up with, in fact, I knew I was getting hit, so I told the crew chief when I got back, you can count the bullet holes and patch them up. I don't really want to know how many until we're done. And so ended up with 309 bullet holes in 2 months. And it was really interesting flying with Air America there.
Wow. What was the team like? It's because that's, I mean, that was a huge deal.
What was that?
That was a huge deal. What was the team like? What were the people like?
Oh, they were crazy. The Air America guys, they were getting paid. I think it was $50,000 a year base pay plus 1% of that base pay every time they flew a regular mission, and then 2% if they flew in the North Vietnam, and then 3% if they went into Hanoi. So it was lucrative for it, but they were there for years, and they were like flew in civilian clothes.
Yeah, exactly. So for you, I mean, you had all these dangerous missions. How did you get through it?
Well, mainly faith in God. I mean, you get used to it after a while, and you just had to concentrate and prayed a lot. And so it was, it's one of those things where you just live with it.
What was your scariest mission? Was it some of what you've already described? Was there one time where you thought, wow, I mean, you talked about the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That obviously was could have gone in a different direction. I mean, every time you went up, we said that. Was there one particular mission where you thought, I don't know if I'm coming back at all?
Well, the one that I spoke of where I got the engine shot out, that was the most dangerous one. I,
Wow.
I didn't think I was going to make it back, but
Wow. And yeah, you did though, thank goodness, right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
You talk about in your book, in one of the chapters, Iranian hostage raid. Tell us about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that was uh, I was supposed to go to the Pentagon out of my school, and ended up getting reassigned to go to Strategic Air Command again, and and I was to train the pilots and to refuel. We had a regular tanker and a receiver tanker, so I had to train the receiver tankers how to refuel in a climb out, because we were refueling 130s, which they had never done before, and the 130 would only go 190 knots, and that was 10 knots below our stall speed when we were normally refueling other airplanes. So we had to put 30 flaps down and come up with some different procedures for that. And I was the only one in the Air Force that qualified for that and that job. And just made lieutenant colonel, and I tried to get out of it, but they said the chief of staff by named you, so you're going. So anyway, we practiced then for the Iranian hostage raid. We didn't really know what it was. We just knew we were refueling 130s at 3 to 5,000 feet. So we did a couple of missions where we'd fly into bases and with no support, and then we would take off in early morning and rendezvous with 130s, refuel them, and that was all we knew about. Well, in the meantime, the Marines were raiding the camp, which was set up in the desert, and they would put it up at night and tear it down in the daytime. And so we did about 3 or 4 practice raids, and then flew to England to wait for it to happen. They said go and pack your bags for 90 days, and so we ended up in England in a little village, playing tennis and golf and waiting. We couldn't drink because we had to wait for no notice call. So we got the call about a week later, flew into a secret mission in Egypt, and so we had to fly over French territory, which they didn't want us to. So we used airline call signs, United Airline call signs, and flew 3 tankers and 3 receiver tankers in formation, filed into Cairo, and then when we got to Cairo, we canceled an IFR flight and then landed in this secret mission. So then we got briefed what we were actually there, what we were going to do, and with the C-130 guys, and then of course then the raid happened in April of '80, I think it was, and so 1 in the morning we found out that they had landed, everything was fine. Then about another hour after that, we found out the general came in and said, hey, everything went to shit. And so we had a helicopter hit the C-130, and they blew up and killed a few people. And so they got the crew out, and next thing I knew, the next morning, woke up about 6:30, and here was a C-141 camouflage with sitting out in the next hangar, which was a MiG hangar with under the sand, camouflage. And so I walked over there, and here was about 100 people with the survivors of the raid. So that was pretty interesting failure in the raid, but it was pretty interesting mission.
Wow, no kidding. And of course, that was playing out worldwide. And initially you had no idea that's what it was, and then it became that. So that had to be a surprise.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. And after you got out of the military, you flew for fun and you had some, because again, the name of the book is Born to Live on the Edge, experiences from living on a farm to flying combat sorties in Vietnam to retirement. But you got involved with a couple of guys and had, sort of as they say, a syndicate or a piece of a plane is how my friends say it, a partnership. What was that like? Because you're talking about Cessnas and flying Cessnas, but you had a couple of hairy situations there, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, it started off with because I started a company when I retired to help small businesses get business with the Department of Defense, and then I also did studies and analysis, and I actually flew some missions for the Air Force Research Lab, and testing out cameras for unmanned air vehicles. And so, yeah, I had one, flying into Atlanta one time, I almost ran off the runway had gusts over my max limit, so I shouldn't have landed, but I ended up doing it. That was a little uh, close call. But and one of my sorties with the video cameras, because I was the target airplane for the. They had another airplane with five cameras on the front, with 90 degrees, 45 in the front, and so I would fly, 100-foot clearances. I'd fly head-on passes and angle passes so that they could find out how far we were out. That they could see a F-16 and interpolate my airplane, which was a Bonanza, to find out how far would they'd have to see with a camera. Anyway, my last mission of that was at a Wright State University student who was going to be doing manning some instruments for the mission. So I talked him through. He hadn't flown before, and so I take off, and well, the door opened, and so I landed real quick and got it locked, and then took off and did the mission. Come back. Well, I'm telling him how to. Well, we came around to lock the door, and so I'm showing him how to land, and what the radio calls were, and I went to flare, and I hear this gear up, gear up. Well, I looked down, it was my gear. I hadn't put my gear down. I was talking to this kid, and so I almost had a gear up landing, put it that way. But luckily, the guy had the first time he'd been out there in 3 years. The manager was out there, and it was an uncontrolled airport. So I was lucky there too. Yeah.
Wow. When people read your book, 'cause we don't want to tell them every story, what do you hope they take away?
Well, I was trying to communicate, how blessed I was to start with, and some of the things, God was obviously looking over my shoulder and guiding me every step of my life. I think, and He had placed people who would, like guide me and get me started, like my coach. If I didn't have him convincing me to go to college, because I was a dumb old farm boy, I wasn't going to go to college, but he convinced me to go, and I had some scholarships and that. But if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have gone to college. I'd been in a factory someplace and living on a farm probably. And then got an assignment to here with a four-star general who took me under his wing, and he got me a really good job here. And I can just name many people. And so I wanted to communicate how important people are in your life, how important God is in your life, and the faith in God, and then also to encourage other like veterans and other people to write their own stories, because as you know, we all we know our parents did some neat things. We never asked them, and they never told us. So their stories were never told.
Yeah, their stories were lost, and that's the brilliance of your book, because your stories are out there and you've lived really some incredible times, and you take us with you in the passenger seat. That's what it feels like. Fredrick Pomeroy, thanks so much for coming on.